Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. This channel is dedicated to finding out whether I really do know it all or not. Make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you ask questions in the comments or at my email address, which is in the description or at the end of the video. Anyway, let's get on with it. This is another in an ongoing series about how life is changing, what things are going on with this whole complete mess that's happening right now. So I want to do something that's incredibly dangerous to do because people can look back at this in the future, and that is talk about the future. It's how will things change over time because of this whole mess that's going on right now. So I want to break this apart into actually 4 sections. It's 3 sections plus a little addendum at the end. The first section is the short-term future, the second is the medium term, and the third is the long term. Obviously, the further away we get in time, the more speculative this becomes. And then the fourth thing I want to talk about is just us versus the planet, right? We're human beings. We tend to be selfish. We tend to think about ourselves only. But there are a lot of other animals, plants, and things like that on this planet. And so what is this going to mean for the planet at large? Okay, so short term. Pain. I think that's the number one thing that's going to happen short term, right? Everything is different than it was just a matter of weeks or months ago, depending on where you are in the world. But certainly life is not the same as it was a very short time ago. Like I said in the last episode, I think, which I'll put up here, that, on New Year's Eve, 2019, who would have thought this was going to be such a crazy, disgusting year as it's been so far? So anyway, pain is number one. That's fairly easy to predict. Also, unemployment. I think that is the case it's certainly becoming the case. Like today is the day that the unemployment numbers came out for the U.S. and it quadrupled the largest number of claims ever at 3.3 million. So you can see just how devastating the unemployment is. Certainly short-term deaths. There will be more deaths from this disease. That's an unfortunate reality of it. Disruption. If your life is not disrupted by this, then I don't know what in the world you're doing, because everybody's lives are disrupted. It's very difficult. I, again, have a lot of episodes about keeping your mental health and your sanity during all of this mess. So disruption of life is certainly a big thing. There's also a loss of what I'm going to call speculative wealth, which is, essentially the stock market, things like that, where it's wealth that's kind of generated. At some point, there's productivity way down at the bottom of it, but it's become sort of its own game where people just play against each other and try to generate money however they can. But there's a definite huge loss of speculative wealth. I'm terrified to look at my retirement portfolio right now. It's a sad statement. I know a lot of people are also making money off of this, which is crazy. And not just in terms of like Amazon and stuff, but also in terms of speculative wealth because they've been shorting the market. There's also a huge loss of real wealth, which is productivity, which means when you have people who are not working, they're not producing anything. And by that, I don't necessarily mean just like economic widgets, right? They're not just making like screws or something, but hospitality, restaurants, tourism, education, you name it, right? Anything that people do that's being productive is being reduced by this, or at the very least being massively disrupted by it, with the exception of doctors and hospitals who, God bless you all, you guys are being outrageously overworked and asked to do more than human beings should be allowed to do. So thank you. We all appreciate that very, very much. One small thing just to throw in there is that this might be good for the planet, right? There's been an evidence of, I think I saw a video, I'm going to try to find that and put it in here, but dolphins swimming in the Venice Lagoon. The air quality in Los Angeles has been better than it was since like the 1920s or something. It's just, and China had a massively better air quality during the height of the outbreak. Now it's actually starting to turn around as they're becoming productive again. On the short term, also, speaking of that, China, this is going to end, right? Even if every single person on the planet got infected by this, which I really hope doesn't happen, it looks like the mortality rate is in the 2-3% range. So, there will be many, many people who will survive this no matter what happens, even in the absolute worst case scenario. So it will end. We'll get through it. So then we can move on to the medium term, which obviously becomes more speculative, and this in some ways gets more interesting. In the medium term, I also predict pain. There will be lots and lots of pain in the medium term. People are going to have to change a lot of things. People are going to have to get used to different amounts of wealth than they had, different amounts of being employed, how they're employed. All of this stuff is very, very, it's not going to go easily. That's unfortunate. There will be an unemployment. There's going to be medium term from this. There's going to be unemployment and a loss of real wealth in the world. That's for sure. There's also going to be societal shifts. Work is going to shift. I have a feeling that people are not going to work at work as much as they used to. A lot of people obviously will go back to work at a physical location, but a lot of people are also going to continue to work from home probably, or some combination of that. Maybe they'll work 20 hours a week at work and 20 hours a week at home. So I think there's going to be a shift in work patterns. Going out is going to shift. In the short term, I guess medium term, there literally are not going to be as many things to do as there were. Restaurants are going to be closed, potentially gyms, event locations like convention centers and other things like that, even malls and stuff, right? A lot of that is likely not going to survive this, or is going to survive it in a different manner than it has so far. So that's going to be a big shift also. I also predict that sports are never going to be the same. Sports had kind of like created a bubble. There was just so much money in sports. And I don't know it depends, right? If this thing is over with by let's say May 1st, which I don't think it will be, like as in completely over with, back to normal, then maybe things will get back to normal. But if it lasts any longer than that, I do think that sports are going to be directly hit. And I think sports will continue to exist, but I have a feeling that the massive payouts and the huge amount of money in it is going to collapse to some extent. So I think that's going to happen also. Obviously, all of this is disruption, right? So in the medium term, disruption, things are going to change around. There's also going to be a monetary shift. The question of the monetary shift is, unfortunately, it looks like the rich are getting richer right now. But it would be nice if the monetary shift would go towards society, if we could redistribute wealth to some extent. Now, that would be real wealth, not just speculative wealth, but actual real wealth. It would be nice if we could shift that around a little bit and put money more evenly distributed. I don't know that that's going to happen. It may depend on which country we're talking about also. We'll just have to wait and see how that works. I also think there's going to be a change in medicine and medical practices. I think a big one is, and I'm hoping that the United States finally decides to get behind state-run or socialized medicine along with the rest of the developed world. But even beyond that, I think there may be a demand for more doctors. So there actually might be some sort of a surge in doctors, or the opposite could happen, right? We could have a drop-off where people are like, I don't want to be a doctor. That sounds terrible, because of this situation. Hopefully the altruistic aspects of life will make more people decide that they want to become doctors. So anyway, but that's definitely going to have some sort of effect. There is going to be a difference probably in the way hospitals are run. There'll probably be more stockpiles of emergency medical equipment like ventilators, which is a huge problem. More wealthy countries may decide to put large resources into having more things, more labs, more research available, so that when the next one of these happens, which it will, right? There's going to be a next one of these, that there will be more things in place to allow us to handle it more readily and better than we're handling this problem. In the medium term, again, it's possible it could be good for the planet. I'm going to get back to that at the very end of the video, but let's move ahead to the long term, which is very, very speculative. So I'm kind of comparing this, or I'm thinking about the 9/11 outcome, which was about 2 decades ago now. So that's a whole generation. So if you think about it, there are adults walking around today who were not even born at 9/11, and certainly a lot more adults that were so small that they don't even remember a time before 9/11. So, if you think about it, a really big thing is that air travel has changed drastically. There's also a lot more kind of militarization of police in large cities due to 9/11. So there's a lot of outcomes that have happened that have just become normalized in the way we think about things. So that's my first catchword, is whatever happens in the short and medium term is going to become normalized. I think, based on this, that we may find things like medical screening machines, like airport x-ray machines, or at the courthouse, or at sporting events, or anywhere you go now, right? You go through x-ray machines. And I think that there very well might be things like medical x-ray machines, right? They won't be x-ray machines, but some sort of medical equivalent of that, where it just becomes normalized that you go through a metal detector to make sure that you're not carrying a weapon or anything, and then you go through some sort of medical screening thing, and it determines and makes sure that you're healthy. So I could easily see that becoming something that happens in the future. So there's a very specific prediction. So if I'm wrong, you can nail me to the wall on that one, right? You have to wait 20 years though. So watch this video in 20 years and then we'll see. I think there possibly will be less travel than there was before, because people will be more scared, although in the long term that will probably balance out and things will shift around and be okay. Hopefully there will be less cruise ship activity. The cruise ships are just terrible for the environment. So, I think if that drops down, that would honestly be a good thing for everybody. More hypochondria behavior, or hypochondriac behavior, if you know what I mean, right? So we've gotten all crazy. My hands are all chapped. We've gotten crazy about washing our hands and not touching things and not touching our face as much. I think that type of behavior will become much more normalized. And that could be a lot of therapy appointments that people are going to have to go to, because we're going to have to find that balance. People have been saying for years, oh, this is the silliest thing. Don't be a hypochondriac. Don't wash your hands all the time. You're out of control. And now everyone's like, oh my God, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Put a mask on. So there very well might be a situation where we'll have to have therapy to try to figure out a balance between what is needed and what's over the top. So more therapy too. I think we'll definitely see more need for therapists over time because of this, right? Any type of situation that's this drastic. I saw an article yesterday about how this is grieving. What's going on is we're not just grieving for the past and the present, we're also grieving for the future, which we don't know, but we fear the future, and so we're actually grieving that. Very, very interesting. I'll try to find the link if I can. I read so much stuff during the day, but it was a man who wrote the works with Kubler-Ross about the 5 steps of grieving, and he's now got a 6th step, which he calls finding meaning, right? So very interesting stuff. And it's, what is it? Anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then he's added meaning to the whole thing. So I think that's the correct order. But anyway, it's a very, very famous steps of grieving. But anyway, we're kind of going through that. Long term, we're going to get over that. It's just going to become part of the tapestry of society, and that's the way things will work. I think we will probably get used to having more social distance. That'll be interesting, right? Because people like concerts, or businesses like concert venues and airplanes and cruise ships and whatever depend on packing as many people as they can into a small space. But I think society might say, hey, no, we need more space now. We need to be able to get away from each other more. We need to have more social distancing. And that may come down to even things like in an airplane, maybe there'll be like little retractable things that you can put up between you and the person next to you. Who knows? But I think people will become much more conscious about social distancing than they have been. And I definitely think there's going to be, this is already happening, but there's going to be a massive shift in wealth from the West, which is Europe and the United States, primarily in Canada and so forth. Anyway, to the Far East, to China and the Malaysian Peninsula, and potentially India as well. You can see this happening. China's already back on its feet and being productive again, while Europe and the United States are just completely, they're catatonic right now. There's nothing going on, completely paralyzed, and nothing's happening. So, and then of course the United States has just approved a $2 trillion bailout stimulus package, and probably there will be at least one more of those to happen. And this is money the United States doesn't have. So the U.S. as a superpower is probably done at this point. I think legacy-wise, it'll probably continue going for a while, but that is a strong long-term prediction that I have, which is that the United States will no longer be the superpower. I think it's going to shift over to China. And I'm talking about 10 to 20 years here, but I think the shift is the inflection point. It's been happening, but the inflection point is now, and it's going to completely shift over to the Far East. And, it is what it is. Hopefully the Far East will do a better job than the United States has of being in charge. But usually the biggest kid on the block is a bully, and so that's probably what's going to happen in the future too. Again, overall, maybe good for the planet. So actually, let's touch on that now. So this is us versus everything else in the world. Human beings are incredibly selfish. We worry about ourselves. We don't worry so much about the world around us. I could mention a lot of things like commercial farming and stuff, and also just destruction of environmental things that happen. But this could honestly be a time of renewal for the planet. With a more conscious population and a population that has reduced its productivity to some extent, there's a lot of things that could potentially go right for the planet, and it could be good for the planet. It could be a time of renewal. Likewise, one of the problems with poverty, and that's what is going to happen out of this, there's going to be a lot of poverty that wasn't there or was almost there and isn't there. That oftentimes leads to war, and it very oftentimes leads to not caring about the environment, because, if you're worried about feeding yourself and your family and your children, whatever, you're not so worried about whether there's plastic litter on the beaches, or whether you're not recycling properly or something, or whether you're burning coal to make energy. So I'd like to be optimistic. I'd like to think this would be good for the planet, and that people will kind of take a breath and think to themselves, okay, how much consumerism do I need? How much wealth do I actually need? Is there a way of thinking about the planet as part of the wealth that we have? Because certainly it is. We're not separated from the planet. It'd be like saying your brain is separate from your body. Human beings are part of the planet. We need the planet. The planet needs us to be good stewards. So I really, truly hope that we will do well. We will do good things for the planet. I fear it will be quite the opposite of that, but let's keep our fingers crossed, and we'll be positive about it. So anyway, those are my thoughts. It's a lot of speculation at this point, so I kind of will be interested to check back on this video in like 1 year and 5 years and maybe 10 years, if I still even care at that point, just to kind of get a sense of how much I got right and wrong. Let me know in the comments what you think. Like, do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? What are your predictions? I'd be very interested. And of course, what are your questions, other questions related to all of this? Please do let me know in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe, or you can ask me at DrKnowItAllKnows@gmail.com. Any of those ways of getting in touch is great. Till next time, bye-bye.